Once again, for those who are joining, we're going to get started here in a few minutes, just giving an opportunity for folks to join in. Thank you so much for your patience. Well, good evening to everyone, and thank you for joining tonight. My name is G. Lamar Stewart, and I'm the Chief of the Community Engagement Unit at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. We want to welcome you to our monthly virtual community town hall. Thank you to all of our community members, our stakeholders, our partners in city government, state government, to our media partners. Thank you so much for joining tonight. And we're looking forward to a very rich conversation tonight regarding services and support for families and communities impacted by gun violence. I also want to give a shout out to my team here at the DA's office, Seth Myers, who's my special assistant, as well as our other team members, one in fact who I'll announce who's our panelist tonight, or one of our panelists tonight. Just want to thank the team here in community engagement for all the work that you do. With that being said, we have several panelists tonight, some who have already joined and others who will join us throughout our discussion as we talk about services and support for families and communities impacted by homicide. And so throughout this next hour and a half, we probably will end right around the 7:30 hour. We will hear tonight from Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, from First Assistant District Attorney Robert Listenby, who's number 2 in command here at the DA's office, Reverend Dr. Myra Maxwell, who is our director of the DA's office's CARES unit and CARES program, Shakina DeChazor, who's the administrative manager for CARES, Maxine Gooden, who's a peer crisis responder with CARES, as well as Andriana Bearfield, community engagement liaison for the community engagement unit here at the DA's office. So I'm going to ask each one of them, just for purposes of introduction, take about 3 minutes to talk about their educational background, their occupational background, as well as their current role at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. We'll start with Andriana Bearfield, then to Reverend Dr. Myra Maxwell, then to Shakina, and then to Maxanne, and also First Assistant District Attorney Robert Listenby. Andriana.
Good evening, everyone. As G. Lamar stated, my name is Andriana Bearfield. I am a member of the Community Engagement Unit at the District Attorney's Office. Specifically, my role is as the Community Engagement Liaison for the northern half of the city. So we kind of identify my areas as East Police Division, Northeast Police Division, and Northwest Police Division. Just about everything within the northern half of Philadelphia, with the exception of the neighborhoods around the Temple University area. Prior to coming to the District Attorney's Office, I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 2019 with my master's in social work. To which part of my work experience for my graduate program involved working with some of the most vulnerable and marginalized community members within the Kensington, Harrogate, Somerset neighborhoods. As well as doing some work with folks in West Philadelphia, particularly with those who have been formerly incarcerated, and just providing resources to keep them civically engaged, but also from recidivism. As the community engagement liaison, my roles include building relationships with community members across the city, but specifically within the northern half of the city, maintaining relationships, understanding the needs, concerns, and questions community members and neighborhoods have regarding the district attorney's office and our work related to prosecution, prevention, and partnerships. So I collaborate and partner with a number of civic associations, neighborhood associations, as well as just general community members. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm very excited to be joining you tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Reverend Myra Maxwell, and I am absolutely the director of the Philadelphia CARES program. I have been in victim services serving for over 25 years within our community. Formerly have been the director of victim services at the Anti-Violence Partnership of Philadelphia. I've also worked for juvenile probation victim services. I am the founder of Favor International, which is a faith-based component in victim services. And I have had many roles throughout the city, and I'm very glad to be here today to talk about Philadelphia CARES. This is my newest program and project that I've been involved in developing, and I'm very excited about this because this is a wonderful program that's been started in this district attorney's office, and it's never been done inside of a prosecutor's office before. So we're very excited about this program. Our goals are to replicate this program in other cities, which we are talking with other cities regarding that. So we're very excited about our program and our process. But we specifically work with victims of homicide here in the city of Philadelphia. We make sure that we are covering the entire city. We have peer crisis responders, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, but I'm very excited to be here. I'm very thankful. I'm also the lead pastor of Trinity United Methodist Church in South Philadelphia. So I call myself bivocational, but actually it's one role, but it's very exciting. So I'm very grateful to be here, and thank you, G. Lamar.
Shakina, you have to just unmute yourself.
Hello, I'm Shakina DeShazor. I am the administrative manager for the CARES program. I've been in the role for a year. Prior to that, I was a PCR for a year. Before I became a PCR, I've worked in the social services field since 1997. My role at the CARES program is I oversee the peer crisis immediate response team and make sure that everyone is getting deployed the cases after the immediate responders respond to the crisis. And I also keep track of all homicides for the Philadelphia area, who was assigned to them, what is the case status, and what peer responder did the crisis response.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maxanne Gooden, and I am a peer crisis responder for the CARES program. I graduated from Regent University with my bachelor's in psychology. I have done case management in the social services field for 10 years. I am now a part of Philadelphia Housing Authority. I was a Ross coordinator for 2 years, and I just got promoted to be diversionary liaison, which is a new program with PHA. And the objective of that program is to try to lower the homicides and criminal activity in PHA resident homes. I also run 2 organizations. I am the founder and president of both. One is Job World 18, which is in memory of my son. We do mentoring. We also offer scholarships. The other one is Women of Valor 74. We do virtual grief sessions once a month. We also do different types of workshops and things of that nature. As a peer crisis responder, I support the families. We talk about the services that are offered to families in Philadelphia, but we also lend them emotional support as well.
Thank you all for those introductions. Let me just ask, let me first say this to all of our attendees today. Many of you have submitted or pre-submitted questions, and those questions, of course, will be asked tonight of all of our panelists, some who are on now, some who will join here momentarily and throughout our conversation tonight. But if you have any additional questions, please submit those questions to Seth Myers, who's my special assistant. He'll get that over to me, and we'll try to get as many of your questions in tonight. While we're in this introductory phase, I'm just going to ask each of the panelists real quick, if you can just briefly talk about what inspired you to get in the work into this field, particularly advocating for victims and co-victims and communities impacted by gun violence. We'll start with Andriana, or in the same order that we started earlier.
I love that question. Thank you. I think my inspiration comes from my family and just my experiences growing up. I am originally from South Jersey, while my father's side of the family is from Philadelphia. I grew up with my mom in a single, parent household. My mom grew up in Camden City and often talked about the experiences as well as just some of the other circumstances that she experienced as a young person growing up in an urban community that often experienced high levels of crime. And how that, and I observed as a child and as an adult, how that often stuck with her, whether she was in survival mode or some of her former traumatic experiences, and how that kind of altered our current reality, even though she no longer lived in Camden. And so as I, went through high school and eventually went on to undergrad and graduate school, I really saw a need for being able to just offer support and assistance and advocate for resources on behalf of our family members, on behalf of our community members. While I didn't have the opportunity to grow up in Philadelphia, I have a parent that had very similar lived experiences. And I think that every family, every child, every parent deserves the support, resources, and community that they need to be able to live their best livelihoods. And so I'm particularly inspired by the work that the Community Engagement Unit does, particularly around preventative measures to support young people, to support families, to support co-victims of crime, as well as just offering that camaraderie that we are in this together.
Dr. Maxwell.
So what brought me to this work? And well, a few things. One, I am a survivor of sexual assault, domestic violence. I'm also a co-victim of homicide. I lost several friends to homicide here in the city of Philadelphia. I also lost my nephew, Joey, to homicide here in Philadelphia. So when I first started my journey, I really didn't think that there was anything around victimization, because this was 25 years ago. And 25 years ago, I didn't know much about victim services. It wasn't something that was advertised, or you had to become a victim of a violent crime or a crime in order to know about it. In my role at one of the community-based organizations that I was serving at the time, they were laying off, and I found out about victim services through them. When I started this journey, I didn't think at first that there was that I was going to be able to do this work, because it's very difficult work. But I found that I gravitated to the work because I did have history. I had lost family members. Things had happened. I lost friends. Things had happened, and I was exposed and had experienced quite a bit of trauma in my own life. Through that, I found faith. That's one thing that was very important to me, and still is. But also through this work, I found that it was a way to support people who did not know that services existed, just like I didn't back then. But I found that this work has been very rewarding. I believe that being there, it's a presence. It's just being there. Sometimes just being in the room with a person who's experiencing a traumatic event, you don't have to speak. You don't have to say anything. It's just the fact that you're there to support them. You're able to help them identify resources, it's really important to get information. Information is one of the things that we want to know. What do I have to do next? Where do I go from here? And I think that this is what really drew me into victim services, and what's kept me there over these past 25 years. Victim services has evolved. in many ways. And I'm very excited to see so many programs and work with so many wonderful, compassionate people. And when I think about the work in general, I know that it is a calling. It is just not something that you just walk into and you can do. It is really, you have to really be called to this work, because this work is tough work. It definitely plays on your emotions every day. But the thing is, it's about helping someone else to heal, especially if you're healing. You want to see other people heal and get through this process and not be alone. And you're able to support them in any way that they ask. It's best, it's to the best of your ability. And I just believe that with the all of the teaching and with all the education that we have to experience a traumatic event, really is the best education and the best way for people to be able to help people. And this is exactly why we have peer crisis responders. They have lived experience just like I have, and it's imperative that we're able to share those moments and help people to understand that, yes, we've experienced it, so we're not just talking about it, we've lived it, we've experienced it, and we want to be there to be a support. But this has always, to me, been one of the most amazing journeys for me as a person, as a human being, and as a professional. So I'm all in this work, and I want to continue this work until I can do it no more.
Thank you, Dr. Maxwell. Shakina and then Maxanne, if you just briefly mention what inspired you to get involved, and we have some questions to get to here momentarily.
What inspired me was in 2018, my brother had got murdered. And in that time, we had no one to guide us or tell us what the next step was. We didn't know who to call to identify his body. We didn't know that there were counseling services for us. We didn't know that it was all these resources in the Philadelphia area to help us get through the grief, the trauma. We was just looking at each other, like asking each other what to do next. Who do we call? So we didn't have nobody to help us, hold our hand, guide us, advocate for us if we wasn't feeling up to going to court or contacting whoever. So that really inspired me in becoming a peer crisis responder, because 2 weeks after he got murdered, I interviewed to become a peer crisis responder, because I know how it felt to not have that help and no resources.
So I became a peer crisis responder because my son was murdered November, Thanksgiving break of 2017. And thank goodness that I had my sister in Christ and his godmom to walk me through everything and to do everything for me. But since his murder, it was my calling to help others. So I had already initially started reaching out to other moms who had lost children. And then I became a peer crisis responder not too long after that. And I've been a peer crisis responder for 2 years now. And it's very satisfying. And just like Mara stated, that it can be grueling and it's very hard, but to be able to talk to other parents and share my story and inspire them and encourage them, it just keeps me wanting to continue to do the work, because I know at times in the darkest moment, the best thing is to talk to someone that has gone through it, that can really relate to what you're going through, but also to help you with services that are needed in the community.
Thank you all. Just before we go on to our pre-submitted questions, the categories are the prosecutorial procedure. There'll be some questions around peer crisis responses. There'll be some policy questions, as well as questions around the DAO's partnerships, around prevention. And then we will also have on here momentarily Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. There'll be some direct questions for him as well. We're glad today to be joined by the first assistant district attorney at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, first assistant Robert Listenby, who has joined us. Bob, if you can just give an introduction, talk a little bit about your occupational background and educational background and your role at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office.
Thanks very much, Mara. I'm pleased to be here with you all this evening. Everybody here that works with CARES, I think I've met almost everyone there. And interviewing people from CARES was one of the most difficult assignments I've ever had, because I talked to people who had experienced profound loss and were committed to bringing about change in a way that had never been done before. This is a unique program, one that we hope will become a model for the nation. And the fact that these people who have had this loss want to give back to our community is really extraordinary. I started off my role as a teacher. I was teaching in East Africa, English, chemistry, math, and physics. And from there, it led to a desire to work with children. I worked with the Public Defender's Office for 27 years, most of that as head of the juvenile unit. And my goal there was to reduce the number of children who go into the juvenile justice system. And I worked closely with prosecutors, and we were able to successfully reduce the numbers from what was about 16,000 new cases a year back then to about less than 3,000 now. A long haul, lots of cooperation and collaboration. I have had the good fortune of being appointed by President Barack Obama to head up the Juvenile Justice Agency for the nation, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. It was he's an inspiring leader. I got to work with him and Attorney General Eric Holder. And we focused on children's exposure to violence. We've written a book on it about how to deal with children's exposure to violence. And so much of what we're talking about here now is about that. So I'm very pleased to work with Larry Krasner because he's a visionary. He has an idea about how to address these problems. Some of these problems are fixable. And I'm very happy to work with those people who are here tonight who are working on fixing some of these problems. Andreana, G. Lamar, and others that are here on the screen are just doing a fantastic job. And I'm very pleased to be a part of that team. So I hope that folks who have questions for us this evening, we can answer some of your questions. We can't answer your questions, we'll go back and try and find answers. Thanks, Lamar.
Thank you. Our first question actually tonight is for you, Bob, around the prosecutorial procedures. Can you describe the step-by-step process by which DA's office staff handles shooting cases? When does the DA's office become involved after a non-fatal or fatal shooting occurs?
The DA's office gets involved after there's an arrest in a non-fatal shooting, most likely after an arrest. Now, sometimes there are shootings where there is no arrest. We might get involved in those cases if there is a victim or a witness and there's been no arrest, but they're trying to be relocated so that they can be in a position to testify without their families being threatened. Once there is an arrest, the case goes to charging. From charging, it goes to a preliminary hearing. Those preliminary hearings are now being held in a special courtroom for gun preliminary hearings over in, I believe, courtroom 503 before Judge Moss. We have some of our most experienced prosecutors handling those gun cases. After those gun cases are held for court, they go to our homicide non-fatal shootings unit. In the homicide non-fatal shootings unit, there's a courtroom that specializes in handling non-fatal shootings hearings and trials, and both preliminary hearings and trials. And they're handled also in our major trials unit. So we have some of our most experienced lawyers working with these cases. We've devoted a lot of energy and effort to them. In addition, we have a gun violence task force that has really been expanded dramatically this year. Over the last year and a half, we work collaboratively with the Attorney General's office and with the Philadelphia Police Department. And in addition, we're working closely with the Philadelphia Police Department by having our staff out in the districts, working directly with detectives out there to find the drivers of crime so we can identify those people who are causing most of the crime in the city. And if we can identify them, we're going to track them down and focus on their cases. No matter what kind of case they have, we're going to do our best to prosecute them and bring them to justice.
Second question regarding the prosecutorial procedure. When it comes to cases involving the illegal possession of a firearm, under what circumstances does the DA's office choose a diversionary program versus traditional prosecution?
I think in the area of diverting gun cases, it's a pretty new area. There are very, very few cases that are gun cases that are diverted. You might find someone who has a license for a gun and for some reason may have not had the license in the city and county of Philadelphia, and they just happen to be in possession of not using to shoot someone. That kind of case might be diverted. But for the most part, there are very, very few diversions of gun cases.
Thank you, Bob. On to the peer crisis responders questions. This question is for Reverend Dr. Myra Maxwell. What is the DAO's CARES program, and can you explain its role in supporting families in communities impacted by homicide?
Yes. So CARES, first of all, CARES is an acronym for Crisis Assistance, Response, and Engagement for Survivors of Homicide. We were founded and started in 2018, and we became a part of the DA's office. After a family is notified of a homicide, we are notified by the police department through the alert system, and the peer crisis responders are normally dispatched and deployed out to the location of the crime, or they could be just dispatched to or deployed to the hospital where that person may have been taken. We are there to give on-site support to the families. And of course, we are trauma trained, all of the staff. There are 13 staff in CARES currently. They're all trauma informed and trained. So they are able to actually walk the families through the process. I mentioned earlier about presence. One thing about CARES is we're physically there with the families, and this is pre-COVID. I'm giving you a lot of information. We physically were there with the families. We also went with the families to identify that loved one at the medical examiner's office. But we're notified immediately, and again, we respond. We make sure that we have 2 crisis responders that will go out to the site or the scene. We during COVID, we've done things a little bit differently because, of course, the hospital lobbies are closed, and people have unfortunately, they have been moved quickly, so we're unable to provide the support in the hospitals the way we used to. But we have someone that's assigned that immediately in the aftermath of that homicide loss, we are, again, get the information and we reach out to the families. When we reach out to the families, it's twofold. We have, of course, the immediate response person that provides that immediate support, which means the information. They usually call or contact the family prior to the medical examiner's office reaching out to them. Once we are providing that support, we've spoken with that family, we share with them the information that they need to go through the process of the identification with the medical examiner's office. And we also provide other supports by referring the families, completing assessments, referring the families to various other longer term services. So we have community-based partners. Our community-based partners are our community-based agencies, victim service providers, which there are all over our city. So we have 6 of them. We also have survivor-led agencies that we also refer families to. The biggest and the most important is assessing safety. Because in the immediate aftermath of a homicide loss, we have to make sure that the families are safe. So we make sure that we assess, along with the police department, that family's safety. And if we need to provide other types of supports, we offer that. That can include relocation support and services. We work very closely with our victim services unit here at the DA's office. We are sister units. So therefore, if there is an arrest in the case, we work very closely with our victim service unit to walk that family through the entire process. After the arrest up to the preliminary hearing, which is handed off to our victim service unit, who will follow up. But if there's no arrest in the case, we still service the family, which makes us very unique, because in the prosecutor's office, generally there's an arrest in the case or some kind of legal action taken. But with CARES, it does not matter if there's an arrest in the case or not. So we work very closely with our partners in the Philadelphia Police Department, our homicide victim assistance officers, also our local victim assistance officers in every district in Philadelphia. And we just work very closely with our homicide unit. So we usually will reach out to detectives, and we do various work, and especially emergency support, because sometimes family need their gas cut on. And you may not think about that, but these are real life situations. The gas may be off. So we make sure that we complete an assessment to provide those types of support as well. So whatever that family needs, then we try to make sure that we are respectfully supporting them through that process. And again, we provide 2 parts of the service. We have the immediate response, and then we have what we call our back end, which is our case management responders. And they actually work up to 45 and sometimes 60 days on a case-by-case basis. And I'm sure the other team members will fill you in on the other information.
Shakina or Maxine, if you wanted to add any additional information, that's not a problem. All right, so Reverend Maxwell, you mentioned that everyone, all of the peer crisis responders have lived experience. You can talk a little bit more about that. And then secondly, how many people are assigned to your team?
We have, there's 13 staff, again, on our CARES team. When I talk about lived experience, each one has an individual experience in the loss of a loved one. Some have lost a child, some have lost a nephew, some have lost a sibling, friends. But one of the requirements for our position is that you have lived experience. The best way to really support a family is when we say we understand what you're experiencing, we can really say we understand what you're experiencing because we all have experienced it in our own ways ourselves. Our staff, they are very compassionate and they're very dedicated, which is really important because you can tell when someone is genuine in this work. And when you're working with families, they are in the most vulnerable time of their lives. And we always say the worst day of their lives, but this is the worst period of their lives because it goes far beyond a day. The day that they get the information, yes, there's trauma, but it lasts for a very long time with families and people in very different places. And one of the important things is that we also make sure that the children are taken care of because children experience trauma differently than adults. So we make sure that we are identifying the children and that we are making sure that we are providing support and getting them to the resources that are appropriate for the children based on their ages. And I do want to say one more thing about CARES, which is really important, is that most people think that when you are providing support to homicide families, when you hear the word families, you're really thinking about that immediate family. But think about the extended family, because extended families can be your neighbor that raised you. It could be your teacher that was in your second grade class, the person who taught you. It could be, and don't forget the girlfriends or the boyfriends that are not spouses. So we want CARES is really there to support not just the immediate family, but also the extended family members. So we rely heavily on our the families to let us know who those extended family members are, because they are entitled to services, because they are considered a co-victim, because they've experienced the loss as well. So it's really important that we let people know that it is not just we're working with that particular mother or that father, but if there are neighbors or if there's someone else in the community that has experienced trauma as a result of this particular incident and this homicide death, then we are there to support them as well. So we encourage you to reach out to the CARES program, because just like we provide crisis support to the immediate family, we also want to provide that same support to the extended family members as well. And again, that's people in the community, because when my neighbor was killed, we all became co-victims of his homicide because we all had a relationship with him. And again, it is really important, but we rely on you all to give us that information. And if you need those services because you lost someone, please reach out to us. And I'm sure that Seth will supply that information. But I do want to share one more thing. As I was looking down when you first called on me, G. Lamar, I was looking down at my phone because a colleague just texted me and said that his family member was murdered. And so I was looking at the phone and I was responding back. And this was a family member, although he may not be the immediate family member, but he's a colleague in ministry. And I just wanted to say that because we work all the time and people call us all the time. So when we think about the hourly, who's working 9 to 5, we're not 9 to 5. We really do work around the clock because people call us, we get calls, and very shortly we'll have a CARES line, a crisis line that you'll be able to call to reach us 24 hours a day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maxwell, and our thoughts certainly with your colleague in ministry during this time. As we continue, I just want to give a few shout outs. Glad to have you on today, Senator Street. Good to see you, Miss Betty Jean Nobles, and Dr. Tony Damon from Dobbins High School, principal at Dobbins. Glad to have you on today. We're so glad today to be joined by Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, of course, who is the leader of our office, chief law enforcement officer in this city. And so glad you were able to take time to join us, Larry, tonight. Just a few questions that we have for you while we have you on, pre-submitted questions. One, can you discuss the DAO's commitment to prioritizing public safety while it also pursues ending mass incarceration and reforming the justice system?
I can. Thank you for the question, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to all of you. This will be my most enjoyable event tonight. My event started tonight at about 5 o'clock. They're going to go till close to 9 o'clock, but this will be my most enjoyable event because I get to talk directly to people who, frankly, don't have a whole lot to do with politics. So it's just great to have an opportunity to speak to people from the community. It's also really great to be here with Reverend Maxwell, who is a true public servant and whose phone goes off all the time. And then there's a whole team. I'm trying to scroll through them. Everybody here is working incredibly hard except Liston B. Liston? No, I'm just kidding. I don't mean that. But this is a real team, and they're very serious about serving the public. They do a wonderful job, and I'm grateful for it. So your question was our commitment to prioritize public safety. I think it's very important to understand that we have said this from the very beginning. The way that you focus on the most serious crime is by getting away from treating turnstile jumping or retail theft by a person living in poverty as a serious crime. You have to take the time away from locking people up for stupid, and you have to put that time into first-degree felony rape, into shootings, into homicide by guns, into terrible domestic violence. That's what you have to do. The system has been out of balance because so much time was being spent on things that were not that serious, things that would never have had you in jail in the 1970s or 60s or 50s. But for political reasons, it became useful to lock a whole lot of people up and make this the most incarcerated country in the world, right? So I see these two things as working together. I can tell you this, and I'm proud to tell you this, that right before the pandemic hit and shut down the courts and really shut down probation and parole, shut down a lot of what the police could do, our conviction rate for homicide by gun and for shootings was nearly 85%. That is a very, very high conviction rate. It is one of the absolute highest conviction rates that this city has seen over the last 5 years in that field. And it's also a conviction rate. You should take this into account. We are very, very careful now that we don't cheat, that the people we put in jail are guilty, that we don't put innocent people there instead of guilty ones and let the guilty ones go, right? It is a lot easier to win when you cheat. Just ask the New England Patriots. They will tell you. But we don't do that. We are not crooked, and therefore our wins are real wins. So I tell you that just as a way of saying we have put the work in. We have shown our commitment when it comes to gun violence and it comes to other really serious crimes to focus on that. And we have some of the most talented attorneys in the United States, honestly. Our number one priority in this administration has been hiring incredibly talented attorneys, some mid-career, some brand new, but honestly, the cream of the crop from all over the country. We take that very, very seriously. And it is an office that is increasingly diverse, which is important in this community. It's very important if we are to have the passion and the compassion to be able to do these things right. So we do that. I could get into a lot of specifics about some of the new collaborations we have with the Philadelphia Police Department. And I want to be clear, I am a fan of our police commissioner. I think she is very smart. She's very innovative. She's trying to do the best she can with a difficult situation that we have. Often the leadership of the police union, which has a very different viewpoint than some of our excellent police officers, is attacking her. And so she has to deal with a lot. But even with all of that, this police commissioner, as well as the last police commissioner, Richard Ross, with whom I also got along very well, has been able to do things like this. We have put a lot of our attorneys out in the police divisions where they work with detectives, because we've been invited for the first time, not just to help them with homicide investigations, but now to help them with shooting investigations. I think that's a great initiative. There is a gun violence intervention program that was piloted some years ago in South Philly. It wasn't perfect, but it showed some good signs. And we have been working with the police department and with the city on that plan. We're going to see how it works out. But the whole point is to try to offer services and alternatives to people who are in danger of being shot or shooting on the one hand, but also to enforce on the other hand, for people who will not put down the gun, because that's the only choice we have. We continue to work with the police department in that regard. We started our own intelligence unit within the DA's office, never existed before, to try to really focus on gun crimes. And I think probably our most innovative and most successful recent program has been that the police commissioner has picked some of her most experienced, talented police personnel, and we've picked some of our most experienced, talented attorneys to look at every new gun violence case where there has been an arrest in the prior week, and then go through them one by one to see if the investigation is as complete as it should be, try to fix any cases where there's another layer of investigation we could do, but also to scheme on both sides about how the training of police, the training of our prosecutors can be improved so that whatever mistakes are being made can be trained out of the system. And we can have really strong cases that will survive in front of a jury or in front of a judge. We won't have cases where we have gotten the gun, but we can't actually achieve the proper outcome, the proper conviction in the case. So those are some of the things that we've done. I am 100% committed to this, and I have to give the courts some credit too. Even though they've been shut down, before they were shut down, they held hands with us on an effort to try to speed up the time from the beginning of a shooting case to the end of a shooting case. It was taken over a year, and we had it cut down to about half that before the pandemic hit and shut down the courts. We had it cut down because the courts were willing to do some things, get rid of some unnecessary court dates that really shouldn't apply, prioritize them. Even during the pandemic, the number one priority that the courts and the DA's office had with reference to cases that got tried, because so few were getting tried, was gun violence, and then it was also rape and extremely high level sex offenses. In many ways, we were able to move those cases almost as effectively as before the pandemic. But of course, we're also operating under the difficulties of the pandemic.
Thank you, Larry. What is your message to shooters and those who are drivers of gun violence in Philadelphia?
You know, my bottom line is put down the gun. You need to put down the gun. I know you may feel like you're not going to live past 30. I know you may feel like there is no future. You have to put down the gun. We are here. The city is here to provide services if we can. But if you do not put down the gun, then you are looking at a jail cell. Unfortunately, if you do not put down the gun, then you are looking at an 85% conviction rate for gun violence. You're looking at appropriately lengthy sentences of incarceration. Do not throw away your life and the life of someone else. Do not throw away your mother's life, your father's life, your brothers and sisters' lives by doing this, because we are not going to tolerate it. The community is not going to tolerate it. And we are very, very good at what we do.
What can faith and community leaders do to support your efforts to identify funds and resources that would support grassroots organizations engaged in gun violence prevention?
So this to me is the biggest and the most important question, because the reality is when we look at things that have worked in a serious way to bring down gun violence, and not just to bring it down for a year and then only to have it go right back up, what we see is this: where there has been a serious investment in community-based organizations that are not being led by law enforcement, and this is sustained over many years, you have long-lasting reductions in gun violence. And at the same time, you have reductions in the number of people in jail, which allows for all that money to go into public schools, to go into treatment, to go into job programs, to go into economic development, to go into all those things that give that, that 15 to 25-year-old young man, because those are the people who are doing the shooting mostly, gives them hope, gives them something else to do, right? Look at LA. LA has a program called GRID, GRYD. This is the land of the Crips and the Bloods. And yet by investing in these grassroots organizations in a serious way, in the land of the Crips and the Bloods, they have sustained long-term downturns in violent crime. Look at Chicago, a city that in many ways is similar to Philly, although certain pockets are much wealthier. But in other pockets, there has been some terrible gun violence, including in the last 5 to 10 years. They made a concerted effort about 3 years ago to get some public and private money together. They got together 70 million bucks, and they put it into community-based organizations in the areas where the gun violence was worst. Now, they did some other things, and we've copied some of the other things they did as well. But in the space of 2 years, they brought down that gun violence 30%. 30% in 2 years, right? So that is where we need to go. And that's why when the Black clergy says, and a community group says, and I just repeat, we need to get together $100 million in this city for the purpose of investing in these community-based organizations that do things like get in the middle of a beef, pure violence model, which has been used around the country. But the fact that they're not connected directly to law enforcement means that people can talk to them about what the beef is. It means that people who, when they were young, were in the game, but have gotten out of the game, can speak to them with some authority about how much they have to lose and how there is a different way to resolve this dispute, right? That is just one of many, many examples of the things that can work here. But we have to do that. We have to find that money. And I'm not saying taxpayers got to find all that money, because the truth is there's a lot of money that we can save, and there's a lot of money we can get from our academic institutions and some of our very profitable businesses. Hello, Comcast, I got your bill again, but here's the news. You got all kinds of tax breaks in this city a while ago, and nobody's starving over at Comcast. They're all having a nice lunch. It is time for you to step up. We've stepped up for you. It's time for you to step up for us, and we all win. The only thing that's going to happen is we all win if we are able to promote public safety in this fashion. So that's the big picture. But there is also a smaller picture here. There are little things that can be done that can make a big difference. And I'm just going to mention one of them, which is this city is not as good at forensics as it should be. And by forensics, I mean the science around solving crimes, right? There's more that we can do with DNA now than we could do 5 years ago. That technology, that ability is there. We have a very, very good head of our forensics unit, Dr. Garvey, who is police personnel. And he's been trying for a few years to get this. It ain't that much money. And there's more that we can do with telephones. This telephone, this one right here, you want to know my entire life? Boy, I better not do anything wrong, because it knows where I go, when I go there, what texts I get, what phone calls I make. It knows who I call the most often, who I call the least often. I mean, honestly, it is in some ways the modern fingerprint for what people do, when they do it, how they do it, who they do it with, and a few other things I don't even want to talk about, right? Just by taking a little bit of money, and the actual amount of money, according to Dr. Garvey, was $5 million in the first year and then about $2 million each year thereafter. Just by doing that, I believe we could knock down the homicide rate 10%. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. There are police personnel who think the same thing. I know that sounds like a lot of money, right? $5 million bucks. Your police budget right now is $800 million. It's closing in on $1 billion. And the amount of money that, there is no amount of money that can justify the loss of 10% of these homicide victims. Is totally unacceptable. The beauty of this technology is it allows you to solve crimes that will never be solved as things work currently, but it also allows you to solve them early and quickly, so that when you have a cycle of people shooting back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, if you can get a hold of it at the first shooting, you may prevent the 4 shootings that are going to come later, right? We need to get behind that. We need to get behind prevention first and foremost, but we also need to get behind having a police force that has more science, where it's not just the same old call for we should get a raise when everybody else is flat budgeted during a pandemic. It's not just the same old, we don't have enough overtime, even though last year was an all-time record. It's not just that. We need to be able to get that little bit of money and use it in a way that is going to give us a lot more shooting solved. Just for those of you who don't know, the shooting rate of being solved was only 2 out of 10 before the pandemic. 8 of those shootings went unsolved during the pandemic. And I'm not blaming the police for this, because we are up against this pandemic just like everybody else. And they have the problem that witnesses do not want to come forward. It's been a chronic problem. But it used to be 2 out of 10 they solved. Now it is 1 out of 10 during the pandemic. We have to do something about this. And if science can help us to do it, and if restoring trust with the community by being fair and doing the right kind of things can do that, we need to go there as well.
Larry, we know that you have to jump off for another call. Before we do that, I wanted to give a shout out to one of our stakeholders, Norman Wooten. Good to see you on tonight. Also, Executive Director of Nicetown CDC, Majida Rashid. Always glad to have you on, Majida, and thank you for your continued support. Larry, we're talking tonight about services and support for victims and communities impacted by homicide. What message do you send right now to victims, to co-victims, to victim advocates who are in the trenches working to support victims, to include our CARES team? There are times where they're getting another narrative from some folks who may be adversarial to this administration. What message do you share with victims around your commitment to seek justice for them and this administration's commitment to seek justice for them?
You know, I would say more than any other, the guiding principle of what we are trying to do is to prevent the next victimization. It is to prevent the next victim. That is not something that traditional prosecution succeeded in doing. The fact is, getting all those death penalties, putting people away for 1 million years, making this the most incarcerated country in the world did not solve that. And so we have to look at models that work, and we have to think through every one of our policies. Sometimes that means you got to be very hard-nosed about getting your convictions. And we do that. Sometimes it means you're going for appropriately lengthy periods of incarceration, and we do that. But sometimes it also means that when you see someone who is on the wrong path and you can turn them around before they get there, then you do that. It really is the guiding principle. I have been a victim of violent crime myself. I have not suffered in any way like the family of a victim of homicide or someone who's been shot, but I was cut across the face very unexpectedly in a robbery a number of years ago, and it gave me a little bit of insight into what it feels like for the years after that to be fearful as you walk by that place where it happens, to see the sun a certain way, and it reminds you of the moment, and to have all this stuff come back to you. This, you know, for it is a thing to remember when you thought you were going to die. That's a thing. So I get it. We have to be compassionate, and we have to be passionate, and we have to use creative thinking and some old school thinking to get to the point where there are fewer and fewer and fewer victims of all of these terrible crimes. And that is exactly what we are trying to do.
Thank you, D.A. Krasner. Mr. Listenby, D.A. Krasner spoke a little bit about the gun crime strategies and prevention collaborative. How does the gun crime strategies and prevention collaborative, you could talk a little bit more about their work in detail, how does that differ from the work of the gun violence task force?
Last summer, D.A. Krasner worked with the Philadelphia Police Department to try and place 12 assistant district attorneys in the 6 police districts right in there directly working with the detectives who were dealing with violent crime. Those 12 assistant district attorneys have been working with the detectives in search of the drivers of crime, people who are actively engaged in shooting, people who are actively engaged in causing crime in communities. They have been working in those districts since last June. And they've also been working with custom notifications, going out and visiting with actual defendants or people who are, if not defendants certainly, but people who are engaged in criminal activity, offering services to those folks in the hopes that they will adopt the idea that if they get some sort of services, for example, opportunities for employment, maybe social services, maybe opportunities to address substance abuse disorders. And then when they've gotten the services, the hope is that they will move away from a life of crime. They've also been informed that if they do not do that, in fact, if they do engage in shooting or other kinds of criminal activity, that law enforcement is going to move in and use the strong arm of the law to address whatever it is that they're doing. Some of them will be arrested. Others will be just followed to see if they engage in either criminal activities such as shootings or maybe either some lesser crime. But if they get in jail, we're going to try and keep them there until we can address some of the more serious crimes that they're involved in. That group of folks, that group of ADAs has done an excellent job. They've also come back into the office, and many of them are handling both the preliminary hearings and the trials involving the drivers of crime. These are very experienced assistant district attorneys, and also a lot of younger ones who have just come along very quickly to develop the skills and talents to do a really good job in the courtroom. These are some of the best and brightest that we have, and they're making a lot of forward progress. So we're hoping that this initiative continues forward, and we're going to be working to get a second generation of young folks out there as assistant district attorneys sometime probably around the beginning of the summer.
Can you talk about how their work differs from the gun violence task force? Can you talk a bit about the work of the gun violence task force and the difference between the work that those who are in the divisions are doing versus those who are working the task force?
The gun violence task force, the job there has been changing over the last year as it's become much, much more intense. First of all, it's a collaboration between the Attorney General's office and the district attorney's office. For the longest time, they were involved in dealing with straw purchases of guns throughout the city and county of Philadelphia, but also outside the city. They were going to these gun shows where people were buying large numbers of guns and then turning around and selling those guns. They were buying these guns illegally. They were not authorized to buy the guns because they had not gone through the purchasing procedures. Then they were coming back to the city and selling them on the streets. One particular problem that has been addressed very recently is the purchase of what's called ghost guns. These are guns that are 80% not metal. I believe they're plastic. And those guns can actually, they have no serial numbers on them. They come in parts, and then they're assembled by the buyers in basements all over the city, and then sold for small amounts of money to folks all over the cities. Those guns have started showing up, have been confiscated. And now the Attorney General just announced within the last week or so that the sellers of these straw purchases have decided to stop selling these guns because it's very difficult to detect them as they go through different kinds of detection devices and screenings and so forth. So the Gun Violence Task Force finds these straw purchasers, takes them to court, often working through a grand jury, and tries those cases. What we're having going on here with the assistant district attorneys out in the districts is that they're actually getting calls in the middle of the night. Somebody has been arrested. They're one of the drivers of crimes. We're asking for high bail for people who have been involved in some of these serious shootings. And for the most part, we're not getting the high bail that we're requesting, but many of them are being locked up, and we're trying to pursue their cases vigorously so that when a preliminary hearing comes up, we're ready to go. In the new preliminary hearing room, I was over there just last week. We had, I think, about 35 cases. 26 of them were held for court. 9 were continued, and only 1 was discharged. So having the best attorneys we have over there with these gun cases, following them intensively, is really working out right now.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to ask Reverend Dr. Myra Maxwell and Maxine Gooden to respond to this. We just got a question in to the chat from Felicia Pendleton. Felicia indicated that she's a co-victim of homicide. She's the mother of Javon Mitchell Pendleton, who was murdered on March 2nd, 2016. Thank you for sharing your story, Felicia. Felicia Pendleton, she shared concerns about how people have become immune to gun violence in the community. And her question is, how do we get the community to take this serious? Ask Myra to respond to that, and then Maxine.
Thank you for that question, and that is a great question. And I agree that people do in some ways feel immune, although we shouldn't feel that way. However, I think the best way to help people to realize is that many of us are experiencing trauma. When we talk about being immune to something, a lot of times it's because of the exposure or the overexposure that we may have had as a result of the violence in our community. When we think about the gunshots, we hear them, we hear the sirens, we all of those things, we see the police presence. So a lot of that exposure too allows us to also experience the trauma. So I think that because when we feel like we don't realize that we're experiencing the trauma. We just kind of find ways to block it out, or it becomes a norm. So we don't want that norm anymore. So I would suggest that in communities, I think that we should really talk about that openly. I think that we should certainly work with our leaders and those who work in services, who provide counseling support. I think we should talk about this. I think that we could do some of the work in the community really to talk about how we're affected by the violence in our communities. We work very closely with Network of Neighbors, which is a part of the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disabilities. And I know that they come out and they do a very work with some families, not on the long term, or work with communities. But I think that that's something that we should really start to consider, how we can really start talking with communities and have communities that are impacted, because we're all impacted by the violence in our communities. Perhaps we should start employing some of those support services and have them come out and actually do some groups within our community to really let us think about, why do we feel that we're immune to it? And are we really not recognizing that many of us are coping with our own traumas? Because don't forget, it's not just the trauma of the incidents, but we all have lives too. So I think that that's one of the things that we should consider.
So first, I want to just say my heart goes out to you from losing your son. As another mom that has lost their son, it truly goes out to you. I want to say, just piggybacking off of some things that Myra said, you know, how it's happening so much that you do kind of become immune to it. But in a sense, it's almost like PTSD, especially for our young folks. And especially I feel like with our African-American males, because we have that masculinity issue where they're not allowed to talk about their emotions and their feelings. So there's violence happening all around them. So to them, it's like, okay, I'm hurting, but I'm not able to express it. I have to be angry. I can't cry. So, you know, a lot of times that goes out, they go back and they're shooting the other people when it's going back and forth. But I think we need to have programs where we have a safe space where young people can come and really share their feelings, so that they can really be able to look at and understand the trauma that they have experienced, and not kind of have to go through it alone and in the street, which is not the good way, because it's only going to cause more violence. So I just feel like we have to have safe spaces for African-American males to come in and talk about it, and have counselors and everything to help them recognize what they have experienced, so that they can deal with it in a positive light versus negative.
Thank you both. I'm going to ask Shakina and Dr. Maxwell to respond to this question. It's coming from Kristen Richard. She just submitted it. Kristen is a PDAC member in the 1st District down in South Philadelphia. And it was always good to see you, Kristen. Her question is, do co-victims generally accept services from CARES? And do they remain in contact with the peer crisis responders through CARES?
Thank you so much for your question, Kristen. We generally get, most of our families have accepted services from us because we are crisis responders. We only provide services and support up to 45 and sometimes 60 days, depending on the circumstance. So they are able still to reach back to us once we have transitioned them to the longer term services and support that are all across our city. So yes, we really do get a lot of families that accept our services. It depends, again, like I said, we're short term, so we certainly want to make sure that they have long term support as well. So we do refer out to the longer term support agencies.
Shakina?
Yes. Also, like Myra said, they all are very receptive. Sometimes we do get some families that's a little hesitant, but I can be a witness to this, that once an arrest is made, they definitely is going to call us back. Even if they didn't want the services before, they just wanted a little bit of services. But once an arrest is made, they always call back to see what's going on, what happened, where they need to be. And they'll keep calling after every preliminary hearing to find out the next day, to find out what happened. So we do get a lot of that. Even though we're short term, they still call us back. If an arrest is made a year from now or months from now, they still call us back and, you know, we still help them as if they're still on our caseload.
Myra, if you can speak to this, we've got another question from an SPO in the chat feature. The question is around mental health services. And so after those 45, if you could talk about some of the mental health services that you provide through CARES and also through those warm handoffs for the long-term care, how are we connecting people to mental health services to combat the trauma as a result of gun violence?
Thank you. That's a great question. I do want to say that most of our families experience a lot of trauma, and there may be other issues as well. However, we work very closely with therapists that provide support specifically to victims of crime. For those who have maybe gun violence, as well as homicide families, co-victims. So we work very closely with the Anti-Violence Partnership that supplies more one-on-one counseling. And we work with other organizations and agencies within the city for one-on-one counseling. But we also have several organizations and groups that provide support as well, and they do it in a group setting. So families can actually choose what type of service they want to help them through the trauma. So we work with the various agencies that supply that type of support and host those type of services within our city. And again, we also we have to tailor that. We were talking about the children too, because the children's mental health is actually absolutely important too. So we work with all of the agencies that provide services such as the Philadelphia Children's Alliance and other agencies that provide support specifically to children, Uplift Center for Grieving Children. So we make sure that in our assessment process that we are making those referrals to those agencies for adults, for teens, for children. And I have to tell you that, believe it or not, we sometimes in therapy sessions, children begin to display symptoms at age 3. So we have very young youth and children that are provided services. So yes, we are aware of all of the mental health supports and services in the city. So we do refer those out. And again, families have choices. So we don't make the choice for them, but if they are not satisfied with the choice, we will identify another support service for them that would be appropriate, because some folks want group, some people would like individuals. So thank you for that question. That is an important question. And I hope that people will absolutely take advantage of those supports and services.
Thank you so much, for Maxwell. I'm going to switch over back to prevention for a moment. I'm going to ask Andrea Bearfield to respond to this question. And as we prepare to ask the question, I'm going to ask that Seth Myers will begin to add our contact information into the chat feature for those who are listening in. I want to give a shout out to many community-based organizations and the heads of those organizations who are listening in today. Those who are on the ground really on the ground doing the work around prevention. One of those individuals who just raised a question, Emil Manuel. Appreciate the work that you're doing around reentry services as well as gun violence prevention. I mentioned Majida Rashid from the Nicetown CDC, and there are others who are on tonight. So we want to salute you. If Andrea, if you can just talk for a minute, what initiatives does the DA's office have in place to provide direct opportunities and services to Philadelphia residents harmed by the economic and social consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I would say, I believe it was in the summer of 2019, thanks to the vision of District Attorney Krasner and the ability to see need in the community from some of the leadership in our community engagement unit, our office launched the One Stop Job and Resource Hub program. I would like to preface that something that we believe here at the District Attorney's Office is that crime and poverty are interconnected. And that if we can do our part as a law enforcement agency to provide resources and opportunities to address some of the root causes of poverty, that we might also see a direct effect in change related to some of the patterns of crime that we see in local neighborhoods and throughout the city. And so we launched our One Stop Hub in the true heart and spirit of prevention. It's hosted on the first Thursday of each month. And it is in partnership with employers and social service providers throughout the city and the greater Philadelphia region. Prior to COVID-19, we were hosting our hubs in person at local school gymnasiums, community centers. I'm sure we would have loved the opportunity to host them outside. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we did not get the opportunity to explore, having them in like community parking lots with barbecues and stuff, something that we're looking forward to into the future. But we would bring our partners, about 30 to 50 of them, to these local spots in the community, particularly communities that are most affected by violent crimes and gun violence, and bring the resources to the people. Now that we're in a COVID era, we kind of do the same thing, however, on a virtual platform via Zoom. So we bring our same partners and they share briefly 2 to 3 minutes about the employment opportunities and resources that they have available to residents. And it's a really great format because for those folks, much like myself, who might have social anxiety, it's not necessary to have to talk to all our employers in that moment or have a resume prepared. They provide their direct contact information and ways for folks to follow up either with questions or an application. I do want to take the opportunity to shout out and celebrate some of our partners, our long-term partners, Lowe's, Brown ShopRite, OIC Philadelphia, Urban Affairs Coalition, Philabundance, Marikey, Interim Healthcare, the Commission of Human Relations, My Independence at Home, the Department of Revenue, Hester Chevrolet have been with us at least, some of them for the entirety of our one-stop, and some are also very brand new and have had many success stories of hiring folks or providing services to folks. Something else that's special and I think speaks to the spirit and dedication that our office and District Attorney Larry Krasner have to doing our part as a law enforcement agency and supporting our community members is that many of our employers are felony friendly. So if you know of someone who has a criminal record and is having difficulty finding resources and job opportunities, please, please, please invite them to join us for our next One Stop. The first Thursday will be via Zoom from 3 to 5 p.m. If it's possible, would love for us to be able to add the link. We have the same link every month to make it easier for folks that want to join in between each month. But we'll also be on the community canvassing. So you may already recognize our One Stop flyer, our logo, or maybe you don't, but we are on the community, those same communities that we would have been at the gymnasiums and the student and the centers, passing out flyers and speaking to folks one-on-one, making meaningful connections about different opportunities, different alternatives to either things that they're exploring now or things that they didn't think would be possible for them. I'm just very excited about it, and hopefully you'll be able to connect someone that you know who might be looking for employment or resources through our one-stop hub.
Thank you, Adriana. One question, let me first give a shout out to Shakina, the Shazor, who, Myra, you don't know this, but she is in the chat feature right now helping me out, and she's answering questions so that it can take the burden off of me a bit. So thank you so much for answering those questions. But one question that did come up from a Linda Lakiski, and I'm sorry if I butchered your last name, but I want Myra Maxwell to respond to this, although I know that Shakina did in the chat, just because I think it's an important question. And Myra is the director of the program. And that is, are there any Latino staff members who are part of the CARES program? Can you speak to that? I know that you're looking to hire someone else.
Yes, we do have one Latino. We had two. Unfortunately, that person took another position, but we do have one, and we are looking for another Latino. So please go on our DA website, and if you know someone that's interested in CARES, of course, one of the requirements is lived experience. Please make sure that they go on to the DA's website and they can submit a resume through the office.
Thank you so much, Myra, and thank you, Linda, for that question. I wanted to make sure that we got that question. And I know there were many questions pre-submitted. I know we We try to get to all of the pre-submitted questions. There are many who've raised questions in the chat feature. We tried to answer as many as possible. We're getting close to the end of our town hall. And so we try to land this plane on time every month. And so I'm going to ask for final remarks from each of our panelists tonight. Any comments you want to share with those who may have been, who may be co-victims right now, something you might want to share with the community at large that's been impacted by gun violence. Just final word, maybe a minute or less. We'll start with Maxanne Gooden.
I just had that feeling that you were going to do that. I wasn't ready, but first of all, I want to say thank you guys for having me on tonight. And I guess my last remark for parents that have lost a child would be to just find that one single light that you can to keep moving forward. Every small steps leads to bigger steps. And I'm speaking from experience. And also to community leaders, I feel like we have to all come together to make a difference. We can no longer afford to be in our own individual spaces. We have to work collectively to stop this violence in Philadelphia. So I just think that we need to try to do that more to help what's happening here.
Shakina, and then Adriana.
Yes, thank you for having me. Like Meg said, I think we should all work together. We're here to help the families as a collective. Once we all come together, it would be a smooth handoff, working with these families, providing them the resources that they need, so we can help them get through their trauma, their grief, just as easy as, someone might help us or we might help someone else.
Firstly, thank you for having me. I feel very honored to be able to speak about some of the work the Community Engagement Unit is doing to support victims of crime and homicide. If you have experienced a crime or have been the co-victim of a homicide, I just want to say that you are deserving of these resources. You are deserving of support. Lean on us, as Dr. Reverend Myra has mentioned. This is work that we are committed to, and it's our job to make sure that you are secured with justice and with support and with care. So please allow us the opportunity to do that for you. You are deserving of that, and that is your right. I also just in kind of just some sort of encouragement, our community engagement unit, we engage with young people in 14 different schools that we partner with, and just have like really plain conversations with them about some of the things that they might be experiencing and such. And so many of our young people are so encouraging. They understand and they see and they hear what is going on in our city and their communities and their families and to their friends' families. And some of the conversations can be really heavy, and we have open conversations about trauma and such, but so many of the conversations are so enlightening, are so just filled with love and hope. And our young people, I'm very excited to know that we're going to be passing the torch unto them. They are going to shift our culture, and I'm sure with their leadership in the very soon future, we will see the changes that we're hoping to see in our communities. So continue to uplift our young people. Let's continue to uplift our co-victims of crime, of homicide, and our communities. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Just before we go to our last two panelists, want to give some shout outs just because that's what we do. Good to see you, Carmetta from South Philly. Good to see Mr. Randall Sims, very, very trusted and key stakeholder in the community. Pastor Clarence Hester, glad to have you on. Jay from DOPE, so glad to have you on. And Bridget Powell, thank you for that inquiry. Yes, we will be supporting Brother Jamal Johnson this Friday as he hosts his gun violence rally here in Center City. He's an amazing community leader and someone that we certainly support. On to Reverend Myra Maxwell, and then Bob Lisby, final remarks.
Again, thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate being here. But I want to, this is a special plea for me. As I shared earlier, that this was a faith leader who lost someone. So I'm speaking to all of us that are folks or people of faith. I'm speaking to us because being a part of support for victims and families, no matter what type of victimization they may experience, is absolutely important. Not an opportunity to proselytize, but an opportunity to be present. Present means to be there, to listen, to hear, which I know that we all know that. But families sometimes just need the presence. They need someone to be there to reach out. So I want to encourage those of you who may even think about, how can I support families? How can I support victims? How can I be there or be present? I want you to reach out to me, because I think that this is an opportunity for all of us, because we all have concerns. But as Maxine said, it takes all of us to work collaboratively in order to really heal. And we all are hurting in some ways, and we all need to heal, and we all desire to heal. So let us come together and let us talk about how we can be a part of the solution and how we can inform the work of prevention. But always keep in mind, as long as there are victims in our cities, in our communities, and we know that there are going to continue to be victims, we need to be there. Be present, be present, be present. I can't say it enough. It's really important. We need your help. And I thank you again.
Mr. Listenby.
First of all, I'd like to thank G. Lamar Stewart for his leadership. Thank his team, Andreana, Seth, for the tremendous work that you all do. It's such an honor to work with Dr. Maxwell, Shakina, and Max, and the work that you all do. My prayers are with you every day as you go out and do the incredible work you do. I want to say one thing to people throughout the city, and it's a simple message. It's something I know to be true because I've seen it. These crimes that are happening on our streets, this violence to our children, this is preventable. We can stop the violence. We have to work harder. We have to work as a community. It's going to take thousands of us out on the streets. I know it's preventable because I've seen it. I've been in Boston, walking the streets of Boston with clergy and community members in the evenings, where they ended homicides for an extended period of time. Nobody thought it was possible until they did it. So I just want to let folks know that this is preventable. I've been with folks from Oakland when I was working in Washington, worked with folks all over the country who prevented the violence. So we have a long road that we're on, but this can be ended. We can end the violence against our children and our families. The second thing I want to say, something I learned when I was in England, again, studying restorative justice, on a trip with the former district attorney from Philadelphia County back in 2003. We must never, ever lose the sense of outrage, just complete outrage at the death and harm to our children. We can never, ever get to the point where we're immune to that. They lost in England one child, and the entire nation was outraged. One child. I saw it because I was there and listening to it on the radios and the televisions. One child they lost, and they were completely outraged. We can never lose that sense of outrage because every one of our children is precious. Every member of our family is precious. And when we see it happening at the scale that it's happening in our city, we can just not lose the sense of outrage. We can end this. We can end this. We must work hard every day to do it. Don't give up on the idea that this is not normal and that this can't be ended. So thank you. And I want you to know at the district attorney's office, we're working as hard as we possibly can to end this crisis and to prosecute those people who need to be prosecuted, to be fair, and to deal with them in an appropriate way. So thank you.
Once again, I want to thank all of our attendees tonight for joining. On behalf of Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, our entire executive team, senior leadership, as well as the staff here at the DA's office, we want to thank you for joining in as we've discussed a very important topic on services and supports available for families and communities impacted by homicide. My special assistant, Seth Myers, added all of our contact information into the chat feature. Please reach out to us. We want to hear your feedback, or if you have any follow-up questions, we want to make ourselves available to you because we're here to do just that, and that's to serve our community. So we're in this fight with you, Philly. Thank you so much for all that you do. Please follow us on our social media platforms at Philly DAO. That information will be added into the chat feature here momentarily. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're also on Facebook. Please follow us to keep stay posted on all of our community engagement efforts and all that we have going on in the community. We do have a one-stop job and resource hub coming up next Thursday from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. If you know anyone who is looking for any employment or any resources, whether that's trauma care or victim services or housing, we have over 30 presenters who will be presenting next week. And we want to continue to work diligently around prosecution, partnerships, but most importantly, prevention. All right, Philly, have a great evening. Stay safe and stay blessed.